Hey everybody, welcome back to English class. We've been out a whole week because of the floods from Hurricane Matthew. But we're going to keep on trucking and get to the Scarlet Letter. Today we're going to introduce the Scarlet Letter, talk about the background on Nathaniel Hawthorne, romantic literature, and the Puritan life in America. We'll see if we can cover those three things and come to class next week ready to start reading the Scarlet Letter. I want to start with Nathaniel Hawthorne, famous American writer, born in 1804, died in 1864. For a time, he was a diplomat in England, a post given to him by his friend Franklin Pierce. Here's a quote from his friend Herman Melville. Gesundheit. To Nathaniel Hawthorne, Melville even dedicated his book Moby Dick to Nathaniel Hawthorne. So we'll be talking about writers of the 1800s, the mid-1800s, and we're starting with Nathaniel Hawthorne. Hawthorne's famous works include The Marble Faun, The House of the Seven Gables, Twice Told Tales, and, of course, The Scarlet Letter. This past summer, I went to Salem, Massachusetts, and went to the House of the Seven Gables, and we'll talk more about how that book really helped Hawthorne establish a name for himself. Now, some of the famous writers who were Hawthorne's peers, we see, of course, Herman Melville, great writer of Moby Dick. Losing my touch here. Of course, Henry David Thoreau, author of Walden, and a great transcendentalist and naturalist, environmental writer. Perhaps the leader of this entire generation is Ralph Waldo Emerson, a poet, writer, speaker. Again, we'll talk more about him when we get to transcendentalism. There is one of Nathaniel Hawthorne's college roommates, President Franklin Pierce. Hawthorne, Pierce, and Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, great poet of the 1800s, they all went to Bowdoin College in Maine. All right, so I want to talk a little background on Romanticism. As we talked about in the Revolutionary period, the Enlightenment, Romanticism followed the Enlightenment into the 1800s. And the focus was on reason and empiricism, or rational thought, theories based on fact. And in America, Romanticism is usually tied with the Gothic genre of literature, and we'll talk about that when we get to Edgar Allan Poe. The elements of Romanticism include thematic focus, where again the importance of the individual is highlighted, as well as the passions of the human heart. Romanticism relied on symbolic characters, so we'll talk about the characters of the Scarlet Letter and what they symbolize. Nature is also a strong symbol. It's emerging from the shadow of the Puritans, and the forest is evil. Though we'll see some of that in the Scarlet Letter, but we're seeing the American view of nature changing here in the 1800s. And lastly, the author uses the supernatural. So we'll see that it's what's called a historical romance. So there are things that are supernatural in it, in the Scarlet Letter. Not going to give away the plot here, but we often see death to many of the characters in Romanticism, and Hawthorne uses lofty diction. And we'll get a chance to write using. Now, the Romantics were influenced by Transcendentalism, which was a protest against society in general. And perhaps it originated in Harvard, and we'll talk about Ralph Waldo Emerson and his famous speech at Harvard. The philosophy of the Transcendentalists is the ideal of the spiritual state. So it's one that transcends the physical and empirical and uses intuition as a way to achieve enlightenment. So the Transcendentalists went beyond the Romantics. Now, as we embark in this romantic historical romance, the Scarlet Letter will want to look for emotions of the characters. We'll see symbolic meaning of light versus dark, the forest versus the town. We'll see this literary movement using good versus evil. Characters are usually one or the other. We'll see guilt as a great motivator, and society and its rules versus our natural inclinations. So we have the struggle of the individual versus society. The main characters, get to know these names: Hester Prynne, Reverend Arthur Dimmesdale, Pearl is Hester's daughter, and Dr. Roger Chillingworth. Of course, there's many others, but those are the four main characters. And you might ask yourself, why are we reading about the Puritans? So you might ask yourself, why are we reading about the Puritans? Well, this was the setting that Hawthorne chose. He sets up a theocracy in the New World where church officials regulated laws and only church members had political rights. Dissenters like Anne Hutchinson were driven out. And we'll meet Anne Hutchinson in the first chapter of the book. So Hawthorne thought the Puritans were misguided in their piety, that their hypocrisy was their undoing. He also had a personal relation with the Puritans. And again, I think that's an important thing to understand, that his great-great-great-great-grandfather was a judge at the 1692 Salem witch trials. And Hawthorne distanced himself from his family and from his past by adding the W to his name. And as a result, we have Hawthorne as his last name rather than Judge Hathorne, one of the judges at the trials. Hawthorne also lived in Salem, right there, and it's really an amazing occurrence that in Salem today, the witch trials still, 300-400 years later, the witch trials are still a very popular tourist attraction. So the influence of the witch trials living in Salem would be something that one would see pretty much every day. So that's one reason why he chose to write about the Puritans. The other, of course, being his grandfather. Now, the hypocrisy or the overwhelming piety, we see an example here where the Puritans even outlawed the celebration of Christmas, repressing the pageantry of that event. Now, Hawthorne also criticized their sumptuary laws, which are laws intended to regulate consumption and reinforce moral standards. So, arguing that their laws are even seen in today's laws in America. He was making a statement there. Okay, and those are the notes for the Scarlet Letter. And we'll see you in class very soon. Hope everybody stays safe and have a good fall holiday. We'll see you next week.